Simon, thank you so much. And colleagues, I hope you can hear me. Can I just say the panel did raise some important points, which in a way provides the context for my presentation. We had a number of words. We had opportunity. We had privilege. We had mentorship. We had power. We had influence. We had allyship and culture. All these are really, really important stuff. We also had complexities. And of course, complexities interweave with things like risks. And of course, there's risks, there's opportunity, there is fear, there is unknown. But I think leadership plays a role in trying to make sense of this. What I'm proposing to do is to share with you some of the work we are doing to provide some supportive materials, toolkit, framework to leaders to help them in understanding racism, help them to understand what it means to provide a conducive environment that offers opportunity to people, to help them to understand what it means to begin to make sense of how to get slightly more comfortable in an arena of fear and an arena where you're not sure. We don't want to make mistakes. We feel uncomfortable. But this is important because people ask me many questions. And they ask me, Charles, you spent 38 years in higher education. You've gone through all that to become a vice chancellor, and there's only one black vice chancellor in the United Kingdom. How have you made it? And how have you created opportunities? What's the pipeline like? We hear today inclusivity and diversity. Inclusivity don't happen overnight. And I ask myself, Charles, who is going to be the next black vice chancellor? Where is he or she? How do you provide opportunity for them? But some of these things aren't new. One of the things we went to do, and I'm grateful to the City Council, Leeds City Council, to Leeds Learning Alliance, and to a number of my colleagues at Leeds Trinity University. We wanted to put this material to support people, because many of us are leaders in our own way. And leadership simply means that individual that puts himself or herself in a position that articulates the vision and the direction of travel, that sets the tone that people will follow and follow willingly towards achieving a particular goal or set of objectives. So in our different ways, we are leaders and we have a role to play. So we've looked at some of the works done before us in different countries, America, Canada, Australia, and in Europe, and look at the work of many activists, and look at some good practices, and say, look, there are some nuggets, some pockets of good, excellent work around this area. Why can't we bring things together? And we did, and I'll share with you the primary focus of what this toolkit looks like. And I was really, really excited when I was part of the workshop on Black Boy Joy, and I saw myself 30 years ago in Leeds in them. I've got a son that is 18 years old, and I've got a daughter who is 11. And I asked them to watch that Black Boy Joy movie and tell me what they feel. And I say, most of those things haven't changed. But some have changed, and they need to change. And I look at the number of people who are excluded in our schools, and many of them are black children. And I look at the attainment gap or the graduate gap between black and white students. And it doesn't look good for the black student. And I look at recruitment policies, and I wonder where in that recruitment policy might we think about equity, justice, parity for everyone. And you look at the health service, you look at the digital world, you look at the corporate world, it's still not fair. And part of that unfairness rests in structural issues and in our cultural ways of looking at things. And we all have a role to play. So it's about humanity, it's about fairness, it's about social justice, it's about how we play and how we act now. And I think it's more than equality. I think it's equity as well. And I think that's really, really important. So we developed these toolkits to help us do a number of things. I'll quickly go through the components of the toolkit. We want to do something that is simple, that is pragmatic, that draws on the good things, that provides confidence as you use. I remember many years when I took up my professorship 20 years ago, and I was mentoring some successful white leaders, some of whom have gone to become heads of departments, deans. And they asked me, Charles, you know me too well. Do you think I'm racist? That some of my students think have shown racial things against them. And I said, you know what? This whole area is difficult, challenging. And at times you do what you do, not knowing you've done what you've done. And perhaps that's element of unconscious bias. We all need to work at it. Charles today still has to work at it. And Sharon talks about language. Language is important in this discourse. We use the word BAME, and not many people are comfortable with it. You use the word minority, majority, minoritized community, fragility, and people are uncomfortable. It is an uncomfortable area, but it's not the only uncomfortable things in human life. So we need to really, really find ways of looking at it. We need to provide something that allows people to draw upon, use whatever they want to use. They can start at any particular point in the toolkit. So there are, if you like, 5 key components of these toolkits. One, it's what we call setting the scene. I think people need to understand what racism really, really means. The origin of racism. Why it's a challenging and highly socially embedded area. Why language matters. Why at times we feel uncomfortable. The role of power, letting power go. The role of influence. How do we be influential? How do you manage being hurt? Or how do you feel when you say the wrong thing and fall over, but you have to stand up? What do you do in leadership? And identifying the key issues, the levers of change, recruitment. We have an issue in recruitment. My university still has an issue in recruitment. What we do with the data and evidence, because you hear people saying, oh, I think we're making a huge change. What does that mean? Is it evidence-based? Can we touch it, feel it? Is it tangible? The doing and the measuring. I've been involved in the area of trying to make sense of this racism. And at times people talk about white privilege. I think there is black privilege too. I'm privileged of being a vice chancellor, of being the only black vice chancellor in the United Kingdom. It's a privilege. But the point is, how do we turn that privilege into power and influence in good? And not something that talks about it. How about fragility? People are fragile because people ask me, Charles, you are a vice chancellor. Everybody's waiting for you to just come and make that difference and just turn that racism in your university. Are you with me? I have some fragility too in trying to sort that issue out. But we must work collectively. Charles alone can't do it. You alone can't do it. But I think we need to be asking ourselves, yes, it's a huge thing. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. But I always say in a marathon, the elite leaders that run the marathons occasionally stop and pick up water to drink. That little stoppages should be milestones for us. We need to ask ourselves in this marathon, how are we doing at each milestone? How do we show that something works? And of course, training and education is hugely important. And it's just not unconscious bias training. It's important, but there's huge training. I also go to training just to make sure I keep up to date. And providing resources for people, especially easy to get resources, free of charge resources. I just give an example of one of the components, identifying key issues. Recruitment is important because if we're trying to find this inclusivity and trying to find those who are in the pathway, to build the pathway of those who are going to be the professors and then the deans of schools and the pro-vice chancellors and then the vice chancellors. We need to find ways of recruiting them, giving people opportunity. Same could be said in corporate world, in schools. At the moment in the United Kingdom, only 6% of head teachers are non-white. 35% of the students in schools, of the pupils in schools, are non-white. 65 are white. So the proportion of their leaders and those they teach or oversee, it's really, really disproportionate. And in recruitment, we need to deal with that. Building the culture. And I don't mean climate, I mean the culture, how we do things, the way we work, how we make people feel comfortable, at times safe spaces, the language we use, the opportunities we create. I think Hofstede, in the 60s, one of the leading writers in culture, says it's the way we do things, how we feel, the belief system. And at times it's tricky, but we need to create a conducive environment. Career development and progression. And I was looking at the young boys in the room I attended, 3 of them, Black Boy George. And I say, look at promise. Look at passion. How do we turn these boys to be leaders? How do we create the opportunities, the career profiles for them to move? Might there be something that provides blockages to these people? What should they be? And how should we all collectively help in addressing those blockages? Really, really important. And staff employee networks. We heard of allyship, really important. We heard of equity, really, really important. And we have to celebrate those who are working in this area. But I want us to have opportunities of celebrating some of the case studies because stories are powerful. People tend to understand our stories. Very powerful. And I was given a story which I did put across in the workshop I went. And somebody was telling me mental health of a black boy and how that impacts on their academic success. And I say you have a young boy, a teenager, leaving home to school. And along the way, early in the morning, he is confronted with lots of microaggression, calling of names, surveilling, over surveillance. And he has to go to school and somehow blocks all that in his mind to be part of the school and have that sense of belonging. And when going back home, he receives some doses of this and is asked to do homework for morning. And I just picture the environment in which this boy is expected to succeed like any other boy. How they just need to just close everything and just be one of them. And you then see how that goes through the many, many years of his or her academic life, and it will continue through the careers. It can be tough. And we have a role to make sure that we create the environment to get that success, whatever that individual wants to do. And it's the opportunity. I think it's important. A good example is, how do you measure? I spent many years of talking about this. People keep talking about, BAME is not the right word. I said, look, you can never get a right word. Whatever you get, somebody may not be happy with it. But we know the centrality of the issue. What we now need to do is to provide measures. How do we measure the progress we are making? I think that measurement is important. Those milestones achievable, and not just talking and talking. We've talked for so many. Nothing wrong in creating awareness. It's important, but we need to go and deliver. How do we assess race equity impact assessment? What do we do when we get that assessment? How does that provide change? And I think the role you play as leaders, we are leaders in our way, setting the tone, setting the direction, following that up, making sure that those who we lead, those who follow us, understand the centrality and the primacy of the issue. I think it's important. And keeping that on. There are so many noises around us, and there will always be many, many noises. Things will come up, and as if it overshines the issue of race, diversity, inclusivity. We need to keep faith. We need to work together. But that vision, following that vision, I think it's important. And I think networks like this are really powerful. No one person can do it. No one person is the custodian of all knowledge in this area. Each knowledge util, each experience is coming together, I think makes a huge difference. And I'm thankful for Leeds Learning Alliance for bringing us together and for the work they do, for which I'm really grateful to be part and parcel of that. So collaboration, I think it's important, not competition. We must collaborate. It's so big an issue we need to do. Everyone benefits. The role of diversity in employment, the role of diversity in the issue of skills gap and skill shortages, the role of diversity in improving growth and productivity. All those units and utils of knowledge coming together from a diverse group can only be beneficial, and we have a role to play. I just want to end by leaving this, to say everyone has a role to play. It's like a community of practice. We need to find something that brings us together. We need to do well at that, and we need to keep the faith. It's going to be challenging. It's never easy, but there are real utils of benefits for everyone, and we need to make sure that we measure the benefits and the successes, because I believe it's powerful, and I see that in my university, where the dividends are beginning to show. I'll stop here. Thank you so much.